The pool of Derek's condo complex was a perfect setting for a late morning outing. It was early enough that the day hadn't yet reached its hottest. The air still held the crispness of morning. Despite its pleasantness, only you and Derek were there. Of course, given the location of the ocean, maybe everyone else who felt like waterside fun was at the beach. You usually were. The warm roughness of tiles felt odd on your bare feet as you walked further into the pool area. There was no sand to squish between your toes or sharp shells to avoid. You surveyed the area while Derek finished putting his stuff away on a chair. The chlorine was sharp in your senses, and the entire space was so orderly. Lounge chairs sat in neat rows, umbrellas spaced out uniformly. The depths of pool was marked out in clear text along the sides. Every single element was intentionally and expertly crafted to be convenient for its human visitors. It was extremely different from the wild mistress of the sea. You liked both pool and beach at the same. Both had their good points. You were up for today's adventure to be something different from your typical day-to-day options. This had been Derek's plan. He let you know about it ahead of time so you could be dressed for the occasion. You wore a one-piece swimsuit and a t-shirt and shirts. Your swimming gear was familiar even if the pool wasn't. You felt prepared. Derek bounded up to you in his own swim trunks, flagrantly ignoring the no running signs in his enthusiasm. Okay. Watch, I'm gonna do a cannonball. As soon as he knew he had your attention, he took off to the deep end of the pool. He built up speed and then leaped into the water. His curled up body created a huge splash on impact, and you applauded. You had to appreciate his talent and showmanship. Had he practiced on how to achieve the maximum splash, such a show deserved a clap. He stayed under for a while longer. He touched the pool's bottom before he kicked himself up. When Derek's head popped out of the water, he swam to the edge of the pool and propped himself up with a grin. He watched you expectantly. And you walked over to the steps of the pool to get in. You dipped the toe in the water first. It was cool, but not horribly so. You descended into the pool, letting yourself adjust to the temperature, and then made your way over to Derek. He slipped underwater once more to meet you halfway. As you enjoyed the moment, your thoughts fell back to how you'd gotten here. Last night, Derek had called with a different sort of request. You remembered that his voice had been a mix of nerves and hope. He had a favor to ask, very unexpected for him. Derek's mom needed him to watch his little brothers in the afternoon. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but that was part of his problem. Lately, he had feared that his sports skills weren't as sharp as he wanted them to be. He hadn't been able to practice soccer or football without the distraction of keeping an eye on his brothers. His idea to fix this had been to ask for your help watching the kids. If you agreed to go to the park with him and his brothers, then you could manage his brothers while he had a chance to focus on practice. That's how he explained it. You said yes, and your moms had been more than happy to let you spend the day playing support for Derek. They said it would be a good opportunity to take on some more responsibility. To sweeten the deal, Derek suggested that you come by early so that you both could hit the pool. Nicholas would be sleeping in, and George would spend some one-on-one time with Mrs. Suarez. So far, the plan had worked out. Ma dropped you off about 15 minutes ago, and both of Derek's brothers were fully occupied. Mrs. Suarez and George were back in the condo, putting together an 800-piece puzzle on the kitchen counter while Nicholas snoozed on the couch. You had time to kick back before the moment came to be in charge of small children. A sloshing sound pulled you back to the present. Derek had climbed out of the pool. I'm gonna jump again. Wanna join? Yeah, let's go. You copied Derek's exit from the pool. It took arm stretch and caution not to scrap yourself on the texture of the concrete. Once on solid ground, you reversed away from the edge to give yourself enough space for a good jump. Poised to go, you and Derek made eye contact. He leaned forward, balancing on the balls of his feet.
No worries.
I've already done one. It's your turn. You showed him your cannonball. You backed up a little more to give yourself more space before going for it. You kicked your feet up, running to the edge, and leaped. Curled into a ball, falling quickly, the air rushed past you, and then you were sinking toward the bottom of the pool.
Whoa!
Ooh! You stretched out and reached up towards the surface, parting your arms to paddle over the dry ground. Derek was laughing boisterously. It was his turn next. By the curve in his grin and the lift of his chin, he looked to be in a mood to impress. His eyebrows drew together in a deep furrow as he considered his launch. Derek took a few bounding steps to the edge, jumped up, and took his body in. Unlike his previous cannonball, the energy went into a spin, and he flipped, making a full rotation before he crashed through the surface. The water droplets from the splash dazzled you as they exploded out from his impact. He swam under the water and only came back to the surface after he reached the wall of the pool. He snaked his hands up to the top of the tiles and pushed himself up so that his hips were even with the edge. He twisted and practically rolled out of the pool from here. You're up. Okay. You backflipped into the pool. You planted your feet solidly at the end of the pool. Not facing the water, you bent your legs and prepared. You swung your arms back until, like a pendulum, you swung them forward. The moment your hand passed your knees, you jumped backwards. You tucked your body in tight as you turned all the way around before you hit the water.
Whoa!
Wow, that was awesome. You kept switching back and forth, trading off between silly jumps and then more impressive tricks. From watching Derek's well-practiced dives to performing your own jumps, there was never a boring There was never a boring second. After several leaps, Derek called a break time, and you took a breather at the back stairs to the pool. You waited for your straitened heart rate to even out from all the exertion. After a pause of silence, Derek spoke up. He pulled his fist to his cheek in thought, squishing his face slightly.
So,
Hey, I probably should have asked before, but have you ever babysat someone before? Yeah, sometimes I babysat for some of my mom's friends. That's cool. Having you on my team is gonna be amazing. When it's a 2-on-1 game, it's rough. You'll even the odds, right? You really felt for him. If given your own babysitting hurdles you'd had this summer, you were eager to take on the job. You wanted to give Derek some assistance, and watching his brother sounded fun. After that interlude, you both continued to enjoy yourselves and your freedom until a little beeping alarm went off. That's time. He made his way to the lounge chair with his stuff and dug out a small portable clock. It buzzed until he found the stop button. Derek checked the time and narrowed his eyes at the glowing red numbers. He shot you a thumbs up.
let's go.
Let's go time. You helped him gather the towels, grabbed the rest of the stuff, and then tried to drip as little as possible while rushing through the halls of the complex. When you reached his apartment, he dumped everything in his arms on the ground and scrambled to find his key. Just give me a second. I don't want to knock or anything in case Nicholas is still asleep. He finally spied his soccer ball keychain and snatched up his keys from where they were tangled in his towel. He inserted the key into the lock, and both of you shuffled inside the Suarez home. 3 heads swiveled to face the two of you, gazes being drawn to the bundles of neon towels coming in. Mrs. Suarez and George were sitting on bar stools while Nicholas perched on the counter itself with an excited grin. They were working on a puzzle. On your left, Derek leaned closer and spoke under his breath.
I figured.
He's awake. Derek's back. Quick as a blink, Nicholas scrambled on his hands and feet and zipped across the blank marble of the counter. Tiny cardboard puzzle pieces scattered. Nicholas, the puzzle. Despite George's frustration, the little whirlwind didn't seem to hear. He was on a mission to reach his bigger brother, not even stopping when he hit the end of the counter. Nicholas stumbled off the edge and Derek instinctively moved forward with a gasp, dropping all his pool stuff except for the towel wrapped around him. Mrs. Suarez caught Nicholas with her forearms, hooking under his chest, snatching him from midair. She hugged her son, holding him securely against her body. A chorus of relieved sighs filled the room. Nicholas still paid no minds to his trail of disasters and began to squirm. He just wanted down already. Derek took another few steps forward, making his way over to the scene. Mrs. Suarez carefully held Nicholas out, her hands under his armpits, and safely set him down on his feet. Nicholas immediately wrapped his arms around Derek's legs. Derek chuckled while tugging up at his towels so Nicholas wouldn't pull it off. Hold on, Nico. You're gonna get wet. Nicholas giggled mischievously and snuggled closer. Derek snuck a quick peek over his shoulder back at you and shrugged. Just as warned, Nicholas now had a damp splotch on his shirt. Hi everyone.
Welcome.
Well, welcome, babe. George summed something that could have been a greeting as he frowned at what remained of the puzzle. It was more than Nicholas, who gave no response at all. Well, Mrs. Suarez's tone was warm with a certain amount of humor to it. She rubbed her hands together and stood up. Derek and Faye are in charge now. Make sure you listen to them. George sourly picked at the puzzle pieces, but gave a grumble noise to signify he had heard. I'm going to head off to my appointment. She went to gather some things, officially putting you and Derek in charge, but there wasn't 1 second to settle into your new position. You are going swimming? Nicholas looked up and stared with huge shining eyes. Derek reflexively stiffened. How would he escape the puppy dog look? Derek's eyebrows creased, a small sign of nerves compared to the smooth, placating sound of his voice. No, even better. He leaned down and lowered his voice like he was about to share a secret.
I've got a
We're
plan.
gonna go to the park. Nicholas instantly frowned. He wasn't convinced by Derek's act. He grabbed at Derek's towel. You were swimming. Yeah, but I'm not anymore. I'm going to the park, and you can come with me. No. The littlest Suarez whined and stomped his foot. His hands balled up around the neon fabric harshly enough he almost took the towel from Derek. I want to go to the pool. I want to see Faye's swimsuit. What? Derek's jaw dropped. Neither of you were prepared for that one. Did you hear Nicholas right? You looked down at yourself, currently wrapped in a bright fuzzy towel. You switched your gaze to Derek's youngest brother, your brain trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would you want that? Why does Nicholas want anything? George rolled his eyes and continued mumbling into the counter. It was obvious to him, and he couldn't believe the rest of you were taking so long to catch up. Because Derek does. You felt stunned. Derek narrowed his eyes and whispered harshly, Nicholas,
Seriously?
George, you're gonna put me into an early grave. He took a deep breath as he stared at the ceiling. It took him a moment to face you. His voice was firm for someone at his level of embarrassment. I must have said something about hoping you'd remember to bring your swimsuit. I was excited for us to be able to swim, so I did want you to have one. Nicholas does not actually want to see you in a swimsuit. He doesn't even know why he'd want that. He's just saying stuff. You ran the explanation over in your head a couple times. Derek seemed sincere, and it definitely made the whole thing less shocking. You snuck another look at Nicholas. He had crossed his arms high on his chest and squished his neck down far enough to rest his chin on his wrist. I want to go swimming. His pout intensified when he said it again. He was a very angry little baby. Derek tilted back on his heels, once again driven to look at the ceiling by the strain of this kid. You glanced up there yourself without thinking about it. It was a calm, white color with a few light fixtures. When you squinted, you noticed something small and green. It appeared to be one of those sticky hands for kids. Was this another present from the youngest Suarez? You tuned back into Derek. He appeared to have made a decision. Alright, I promise that you can go swimming too, but only after the park. We'll go to the pool as soon as we come back. With the promise officially made, Nicholas lit up. He snatched one of Derek's hands. Let's go. We gotta get to the park so I can swim. While Nicholas celebrated, Derek closed his eyes and some of the worried creases on his face smoothed out. Derek, there's lunch packed in the fridge. Dad will be back before dinner. Gotcha. Thanks, Mom. Have a good time. Mrs. Suarez waved and collected the last of her things. Her purse off of the side table. She ruffled George's hair on her way out. You and Derek were only one with the kids. Oh, you and Derek were alone with the kids. Oh, we should really stop leaving puddles everywhere. He gestured at the drops of water pooling at his feet. You nodded, feeling uncomfortable at not being fully dressed. You and Derek took turns changing. You went first, while you could faintly hear Derek impressing on his brothers to listen to you too. He must have convinced them to behave for now, as neither George nor Nicholas acted up when Derek took his turn drying off and clothing himself. Can you get our lunch from the fridge? I'm gonna pack my gear. No problem. You walked casually to the kitchen. George hadn't moved from his bar stool even once since you gotten back. Meanwhile, Nicholas followed Derek like a possessed shadow that was even more energetic than the original. He zipped around, occasionally trying to place things in Derek's backpack for him. So far, Derek had said no to the rubber duck, but he had agreed to bring an extra pair of socks that Nicholas had determined were absolutely necessary. Okay, got everything. Derek returned with a backpack in one hand and Nicholas's small hand in the other. We're going. George, ready? Faye? Yeah. Sure. He pushed away from the counter and finally hopped off his chair with the enthusiasm of a plank of wood. We're going. Derek hid his smile at Nicholas's echo and ushered everyone outside. He locked the condo behind him, and you began the trip to the nearby park. The park for the Suarez boys was the big park for your family. Their condo complex was only a short distance to the public outdoor recreational area your moms sometimes drove you to. It was still a beautiful day outside and had only gotten a few degrees warmer from your morning swim. The field was bustling with other groups of people enjoying themselves. Derek led the way to a wide open part of the grass that no one else was using. He stopped in the middle of the field and turned 180 degrees to face the little boys behind him. He shrugged his backpack off of his shoulders and dropped it to the ground. He kneeled down to root around inside it. George and Nicholas waited in place for their brother. Derek gathered a couple things in his arms before pushing off the ground with his knee to get up again. He held a football in his left hand and a soccer ball in his right. All right, Nicholas, George, I've got to practice, but you can too. Which one do you want?
Okay.
Football. Real ball. He raised an eyebrow at their shouts. Derek leaned over to you and whispered with a laugh. He means the soccer ball. It's real because it's actually ball-shaped. Is that a problem? They want both. Derek simply grinned. I thought so. He tossed George the football first. George caught it from out of the air with one hand and began to bounce it up and down in his fingers, feeling the weight of it. Derek popped the soccer ball gently over to Nicholas, who watched his brother intently. Nicholas had to catch it with both hands. He wrapped his arms around the ball and hugged it to his chest. And with his brothers taken care of, Derek crouched again to reveal a third ball. He brought a second soccer ball. Derek had been prepared. He then sprung back to his feet. Another problem diverted. George, Nicholas, you can use this half of the field. I'll use that half. Faye can be your ref, but don't get too far from her, alright? Okay. George tossed his football in the air. Preoccupied, it spun in an arc downward. Alright, I'm gonna practice. Nicholas embraced his soccer ball tighter, pressing his cheek into it. He wondered just how he'd practice it when the equipment was about as big as his head. The child looked completely content with the world, but Derek's eyes narrowed. Once again, he shared some Nicholas info into your ear. Watch him. It's not over. He copies what I say, but it's not what he means. You snuck a peek at Nicholas. He appeared so innocent, clutching his ball and staring at a patch of clover in the grass, but you interacted with him enough to not question his potential for trouble. You'd make sure to keep an eye on that kid. You nodded at Derek without looking away from Nicholas. Thanks, Faye. You're a lifesaver. Derek held his soccer ball in both hands and cheered. Bye, bros. Bye. Bye, bro. Derek put on a smile as he picked up his bag, tucked his soccer ball under an arm, and jogged to his side of the field. He didn't have time to lose. You stood with the younger Suarez boys, effectively turned loose. George stared at you with uncertainty while Nicholas's mischievous smirk could only make you guess what he was thinking. You weren't going to make Mr. and Mrs. Suarez regret letting you come, and you especially weren't going to disappoint Derek. You were going to watch those boys. Time to be in charge. I'm going to play over there. He pointed vaguely to the opposite side of the field from Derek and trotted off to entertain himself. You let him go without argument. George wasn't the problem child. When you saw him settle in, Throwing around his football and chasing it, you smiled. You would only need to manage Nicholas. You aimed your grin towards him, but instead of being in the clover patch, he was missing. You snapped your head back and forth until you spotted him in a fumbling dash across the grass, struggling to keep his soccer ball from slipping out of his small arms. When Derek said watch him, he had really meant it. Well, you just have to push up your sleeves. He wasn't the first troublemaker you had ever dealt with, and he wasn't going to be the last. You ran over and picked him up. Even with your longer legs, it was still tricky to catch the kid. He shrieked and laughed when you plucked him off the grass. The soccer ball tumbled from his arms. He reached for it with all his might, stretching his arms and kicking his legs for momentum. You couldn't contain him, so you carefully placed him back on his feet before he could fall. Then you kicked the ball back to him and suggested playing. Let's play. I'm gonna get it. He squealed at the idea. He chased the ball, determined to beat you to it, and wound up to kick. He overshot the angle of his foot and the ball bounced off awkwardly. Then you were the one after the soccer ball. It didn't go that far. You let Nicholas get it again, so he could continue to gradually kick the ball across the field. He sent some strands of grass into the air along with the ball on his second go. Darn, I'm gonna get you. Nicholas cackled while bumping the ball along. No, I'm gonna win. When you next got close to the soccer ball, he switched strategies. Nicholas grabbed it in his hands so he could simply run for it. That's not how soccer works. It's mine. You laughed off his blatant rule breaking and started running around after Nicholas directly. The only times your gaze strayed from the little Suarez was when you blinked or sent the occasional glance George's way. George continued to enjoy his time at the park without any need for assistance, so you spent most of your energy on the mischief maker. And after smoothing out the initial bump of the afternoon, things evened out, at least. Things were fine until the trial known as lunch arrived. It started with the reappearance of Derek. His presence sent Nicholas into hyperdrive. He bounced on the tips of his toes and waved both his hands frantically. Derek's back. He tackled his older brother and laughed and latched around Derek's left leg. George, like half of the entire park, noticed the shout. He jogged over to see if any important updates were happening without him. Derek winked. Hey bros. Hi Faye. I hope you're doing alright. As he spoke, he let his bag drop to the ground. He crouched over it and scrounged up the packed lunches. I'm having fun. That's awesome. You beamed back at him. Despite being a handful, you were enjoying Nicholas. He kept you on your toes. Are you having fun, Nicholas? Yeah, me too. What about you, George?
Yeah.
Yeah. Derek set aside 3 paper bags in the grass, one in front of Nicholas, another next to George, and the third went to you. Derek kept the fourth lunch inside his backpack. He only pulled a water bottle out from it and closed the bag back up.
Okay.
Okay, Nicholas, you've gotta eat now with Faye and George. Nicholas clenched Derek's jeans more desperately as he whined. You're not gonna eat with me? Derek scratched the back of his head and gave a longing glance back to where he'd been practicing. Do you mind, Faye? I was hoping I'd had more time to practice. He bit his lip, hope clear on his face. He had confidence that he could handle lunch alone. Sure, good luck with your practice. Thanks, I owe you one. Nicholas whimpered. Nicholas's whimpering never stopped, being high-pitched background noise. Derek ruffled his hair. Hey, check this out. He picked up Nicholas' soccer ball and placed it on the top of his own head. Nicholas's jaw dropped. Theatrically, as Derek fully stood up while keeping it balanced. Wow! Nicholas cheered and jumped up and down, still holding on to Derek's leg. Derek bent his knees and then popped up fast enough to launch the ball in the air. He caught it on his head again. Ha! Nicholas let go of his brother to clap. Derek grinned at Nicholas, but his gaze flicked to you for a second. The show was over. Derek inclined his head and let the soccer ball drop into his hands. He held it out to Nicholas. Make sure to eat a good lunch, okay? Then you can get back to practicing. Okay. Nicholas spoke into the soccer ball he had cuddled to his face. He'd been starstruck enough that he couldn't disagree with anything his biggest brother said. Derek waved at you and George before heading off to where he'd left his soccer ball, carrying only the water bottle with him. George promptly took a seat in the grass by the lunch bags. Nicholas put the soccer ball on his head. It immediately rolled off. He just tried again. You reached over to the lunches. Each bag had a clearly written name in black marker ink. George collected his bag. You had yours, and you attempted to give the last one to its proper owner. But Nicholas showed zero interest in the bag. You imagined that he would have been more interested in Derek's lunch bag, even though they probably had the same meals. George scoffed, knowing his brother was going to be difficult again. He took a sandwich from his bag. From looks alone, you guessed it as sliced deli turkey and a pale-colored cheese and some veggies. With Nicholas clearly busy, you took his sandwich out for him. The sandwich was ham and some sort of orangey cheese, cheddar almost certainly. You offered the food directly to Nicholas, and he still didn't bite. He wanted to play. If you eat, I'll hold the ball on your head for you. Deal? Nicholas chewed on the inside of his cheek while he carefully contemplated your suggestion. Then the focused look melted into a bright smile.
Alright.
All right. He gave you a determined nod when he was ready to switch. Your fingers fanned out as you reached for the ball and pressed it down into his messy mop of hair. Nicholas cautiously released the ball, and you kept it firmly in place. He giggled ec- ecstatically that he finally found a way to keep the ball up without using his hands. It just took another person to do it. He retrieved to he retrieved his sandwich and immediately stuffed a big bite into his cheeks. Chuckling, you took a glance over at what George was doing. Luckily, he didn't need a hand like his brother. He was already enjoying his packed lunch, so you decided not to squander the opportunity. You retrieved your own sandwich with your free hand, and again, it was definitely an interesting way to enjoy a meal break. Finishing the last corner of your square-shaped meal, you wondered if Mrs. Suarez had talked to one of your moms beforehand about lunch. The sandwich was made how you would have had it at home. She was either prepared or very lucky, but considering what her oldest son was like, you were guessing luck and nothing to do with it. Along with the sandwiches, were also bags of carrots, celery, and a few cookies. Between the three of you, it wasn't long before all the snacks were gone. With nothing left to nibble on, Nicholas yawned and curled up in the grass, cuddling the soccer ball against his chest. George stood up, watching his little brother fall asleep. Once he was certain that Nicholas was down for the count, he started cleaning up the trash. You admired the maturity he showed for his age. It wasn't just Derek who had that streak. After all, you helped gather the trash while musing about the Suarez brothers. Derek was the oldest and who his parents relied on, while Nicholas was the baby of the family, and for a little kid, he was a force to be reckoned with. George was the one stuck in the middle. Hey, I saw your football throws earlier. They were really good. George spun around on his heel. He seemed stunned, like he wasn't sure if he imagined your compliment or not. In a couple years, you could totally get on a juniors football team. He nodded, and a blush grew on his face until it reached his ears. Okay. He hurriedly went back to what he was doing before. George was embarrassed, but you also noticed there was a bounce in his step that wasn't there before. The park suddenly felt empty with Nicholas asleep. He took up a lot of space despite his tiny size. Chuckling to yourself, you found a comfortable spot in the grass and scanned the area for Derek. You eventually caught sight of him, running in the distance. Even from here, you could tell that Derek was persistent about his practice. He went back and forth, repeating the same set of moves, reassessing and refining his form every time. Though it wasn't long before he paused to wipe his brow with his black wristband. Derek happened to glance your way at the moment and realized that he had an audience of one. He gave a huge wave with both hands that required his cross both his arms over his head, and before you knew it, Derek's strides were bringing him back over to you and his brothers.
Phew.
Phew, that's it. I'm gonna be done with practice. I'm back. You proudly put all of your support behind the thumbs up you gave him. A few seconds later, you even added another thumb too, and Derek laughed, truly appreciative of your encouragement. Thanks for watching, George and Nicholas. I didn't mean for it to be so long. It's okay. I'm happy I could help you out. The sincerity in your voice had Derek bashfully keeping his eyes on his shoes instead. I'll probably end up saying it again, but thanks, Faye. You're a lifesaver. Next, he shifted his attention over to his brothers. George gave a little wave. He'd been waiting patiently for his big brother to wrap up his conversation with you. We're going back. George simply caught up, not needing any more guidance, while Derek kneeled in the grass to nudge Nicholas out of dreamland. A single eye cracked open at first, and then they both popped wide open when he realized who was with him. Derek! Nicholas sprang off the ground, wrapping his arms around his big brother like a vice grip and nuzzled into his chest. Derek gave Nicholas's head a single pat.
Let's go.
Practice was good today. Let's go home.
Let's go home.
Let's go home. Nicholas's hushed voice echoing his little brother's put a warm smile on your face. Stretching your arms high overhead, you surveyed the area to make sure that nothing was being left behind. You were all clear, and it felt good to have another solo round of babysitting successfully under your belt. With your leadership, no one got lost, injured, swallowed something they shouldn't have, or even declared that they hated you for eternity. So, in your book, you'd say it went fairly well. The 15-minute walk back to the park. The 15-minute walk back from the park passed by pleasantly. The late afternoon sun fell behind you, and your shadow soon stretched across the sidewalk. You wiggled your fingers and then exaggerated your hand's movement in order to watch the shadow change. Meanwhile, next to you, Derek was finally eating his lunch. Although he had to eat his sandwich with the hand Nicholas wasn't clasping tightly onto. George entertained himself with the soccer ball he still carried. He periodically tossed it up into the air and caught it again. You could easily imagine how often the three of them had made this trip before, with only the three of them, but you didn't feel out of place strolling alongside the group. It felt natural. Beaming, you found your gaze settling on Derek again. You knew without a doubt that the way you felt was because of him. He was so good at making you feel welcome. In time, you made it safely back, and Derek dropped his bag on the floor without a quiet sigh of relief. Any hope he had to take things easy for a second immediately evaporated. We're going to the pool as soon as we come back. Nicholas's joy was palpable, parroting back Derek's promise from earlier in the day. As the words dawned on him, Derek closed his eyes and breathed deeply.